What's up, guys, and welcome to the NFL Week 17 edition of Player Pool. Going to take a look at the Week 17 slate for DraftKings, including a few games that stand out, at least on paper, as the best ones to target for this slate this week. So I'm going to dig into that right after this. What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Player Pool. Simon Edwards at PumaCom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and we're going to dig into the NFL Week 17 main slate for DraftKings lineup building and analysis. So before we dig into that, make sure to hit the like button. I'm looking for 30 likes to put out my favorite picks in the comment section a little bit later on, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm looking for 1,500 subscribers. Very close to hitting that mark. I'm at about, you'll probably need about 50 more to get there. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, please hit that and help me out. And this is going to be an interesting slate this week. We got a few games that stand out, at least on paper, as really good matchups for each other. One of them has a really low total, but the matchups are all, just shining green on my spreadsheet and look like a really good potential sloppy shootout situation. We got another one that, is less of a sloppy shootout situation and more of a competent shootout situation. And then we have, of course, the Minnesota Green Bay game, which has a high total, but on paper it doesn't look like a lot of the positions are going to sync up with that high total. But it's a playoff caliber game, and it should be an interesting one. So we'll dig into that in a second here. Let's go over to the screen share with the DraftKings player pool. Going to look at New York Jets versus Buffalo as the first game. Looks like we got a rain situation there. So keep an eye on that and how serious that rain situation is going to be. Josh Allen versus Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers at this point is pretty much, I think he's done in New York. He's probably auditioning for his next team. Meanwhile, Allen is playing for not a first overall seed anymore. Kansas City clinched that. Not really sure what exactly. Probably they're still probably playing for their number 2 overall seed. So that's something that's going to be pretty important to check out. Let's go over to the NFL playoff situation here. All right, so I like to use the playoff situation over here on NFL.com. So the Ravens won. They're 11-5 now. If the Bills lose, they would be 12-4. I think they're pretty secure with that number 2 overall seed. So I'm not sure exactly what, if anything, the Bills are going to be playing for this week. But I haven't heard anything about like resting starters or anything like that. But we probably won't hear about that until next week. But the Bills are obviously a high-powered offense. They're facing a division rival in the Jets this week. The Jets, like I said, they don't have anything to play for other than like stats and pride. And we're looking at Aaron Rodgers, who's come alive recently. If you look at his game log, he's had a few weeks with 30 DraftKings points, 20 DraftKings points. He had 20 DraftKings points a few weeks before that too. Last week, he only had 13 DraftKings points. That was against the Rams. But, I could see the Jets just trying to get as much, passing stats as possible. He had 18 DraftKings points against the Bills last time they faced off. The Bills are giving up only 16.4 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position, but they've been susceptible recently, the last 4 weeks or so. They've given up 23.9 DraftKings points a game to wideouts and 19.8 to slots, which is a big number. It's one of the biggest uh, you know matchups that a slot receiver can get. I think the only one worse against slot receivers is the Jets. So the Jets and the Bills are both giving up 20 or so DraftKings points a game to the slot position. So that's going to be interesting for Khalil Shakir and for Devontae Adams. Devontae is questionable. He's got a hip issue, but there's supposedly optimism that he's going to play. But you can see he's been the target leader basically since he joined the Jets. He had decent games as well. 19.8 DraftKings points again versus the Rams last week. 45.8 a couple weeks ago. 28.9, 17.6. So it's basically like the Green Bay connection is in the Jets right now, except they're not winning any games. But Adams has been on fire these last few weeks. We're seeing the old Devontae Adams, and now he gets a matchup where he's running primarily in the slot, and he gets a matchup against a Buffalo team that has been susceptible to slot receivers. So that is going to make Devontae Adams interesting. On the other side, we got Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir has he's had a few good games this season, a few games over that 20 DraftKings point mark. But if the Jets are able to successfully attack the slot position or successfully attack this weakened pass defense, then Shakir, I could see getting a decent amount of usage in this game. The Jets are basically only susceptible to the slot. They've given up 17.6 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, 10.6 to the tight end position, 20.4 to running backs, and 15.9 to the running back position. To the quarterback position. So the weakness in this matchup is the Buffalo defense. And if Buffalo's defense allows the Jets to put up points, Josh Allen should be able to answer those points with no problems, which could turn this into a potential shootout situation. We do have a 9.5 point spread in favor of Buffalo. The total that I see is 46.5 points right now. So, this could easily turn into a shootout situation depending on what type of mentality the Jets have this week. Let's take a look at the injury situation with the Jets. See if they're resting a bunch of guys, or they're placing a bunch of guys on IR. That's what you tend to see towards the end of the season with these teams that have pretty much been eliminated. And you can see it mainly in the wide receiver core. Got a bunch of guys missing there. Devontae, as I said, was questionable. Tyron Smith, the left tackle, is on IR. As far as the defense, we got a bunch of guys that are questionable, bunch of big guys that are questionable. Quinnen Williams, Hassan Reddick, Sauce Gardner, Tony Adams, Michael Carter, all those dudes being questionable. And then you're looking at all these guys on IR already on the defense. Depends on what the situation is going to be for these guys that are questionable. But if these guys are all, like out, or like a portion of them are out for tomorrow's game, that's going to be hugely significant for Buffalo's offense. Buffalo should be able to have their way with this team if they're missing that many defensive players. On the other side, relatively healthy situation for the Bills. They don't look like they have a whole bunch of injuries that we're concerned about. Taylor Rapp and Damar Hamlin, the safeties, look like they're questionable. but nobody's been ruled out. So should be a uh, pretty good matchup for the Bills offense. And like the Bills defense has been giving up points in the passing game recently. So it's going to be a good situation for a potential shootout in this one, or a potential ability for both teams to put up points. So at least the setup is there, and we're going to have to wait and see, like if they're actually able to make it happen. But don't be surprised if this one ends up being a little bit higher scoring. Keep an eye on the weather, though. The weather is going to play a huge role. We also got weather situation in the next game, but let's take a look at some of these other guys. Garrett Wilson, he's kind of felt the impact of Devontae Adams. He's, he had a few 30-point games before Devontae got there. And then his most recent best game is 21 DraftKings points against Miami, facing Buffalo. I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a decent game. I don't hate double stacks with Aaron Rodgers if we think that Rodgers is going uh, to just kind of take control of this offense, and just make it a complete like passing fest against Buffalo to try to put up some points against his team. But Wilson would be in play, Adams would be in play, Shakir in play on the other side. Amari Cooper, I'm not sure what the hell is going on with Amari Cooper. He hasn't really done anything since he got to Buffalo. He had a 14 target game. He only had 15 DraftKings points with that. But just a super down year for Amari Cooper in general. Be interesting to see if he picks things up before the playoffs start. Let's take a look at what his snap counts are. With Buffalo, the snap counts are kind of weird. Like Mac Hollins, 42%, Khalil Shakir, 44%, Keon Coleman, 39%. These guys just have these really low snap counts. Let's go to Amari Cooper. He's over here in the multi. Amari Cooper, 32% snap share. So even with 32% snap share, he's about like a quarter less than these other teams, but he's just not doing anything with the opportunities that he's getting. So maybe he still needs to get acclimated to the offense, but he was really sluggish with the Browns before he joined the Bills. So maybe he's just washed. It could be that he's just washed. He's getting older. Keon Coleman would be interesting too in a potential shootout situation, but I think I'd tend to lean towards Shakir. I don't like putting too many of these pass catching weapons on the Bills in that like in the same lineup, because you never know which one of these guys are going to pop off. They spread the ball out so much, and they all have low snap shares, so it's tough to kind of pinpoint one of these guys to put in with Josh Allen. As far as tight ends, Dalton Kincaid running a decent amount in the slot as well. If he has that same weakness that they're dealing with, then Dalton Kincaid could be interesting. Hasn't done a whole lot this season. He has only a couple touchdowns, might be due for some touchdown regression in this one. He's at 4,300, but Kincaid is another guy to consider in this game. All right, let's go on to Tennessee versus Jacksonville. This is another one that could be a potential sloppy shootout situation. Got a rain concern in this one too. Rain is a real concern. We see a lot of these games go under the total when we have these supposed scattered showers that turn into torrential downpours. So, be cautious with the forecasts, and try to see if you can get actual visuals of the like the city that they're playing in to kind of get a real idea of what kind of rain is happening in these games. Uh, Mac Jones versus Mason Rudolph in this one. Trevor Lawrence is on IR, and Levis, I guess, got benched. So, Mac Jones versus Rudolph is what we have, and that's actually better for Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley's done better with Mason Rudolph as the quarterback than he has with Levis. If we're looking at some of the points allowed by the defense, Tennessee is allowing 26 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. Jacksonville's allowing 23.3 to wideouts, 15.7 to slots, and 13.8 to tight ends. Basically, Tennessee's offense has good matchups across the board. Meanwhile, Jacksonville has good matchups for the quarterback, the wideouts, and the running back position. The slots and the tight ends versus Tennessee, not so much. So that's going to make Ridley interesting. Thomas Jr., it makes interesting. Thomas Jr. has done decently with Mac Jones these last couple of weeks, 35 DraftKings points and 31 DraftKings points. He's done some damage lately, and before that, 16 and 18 DraftKings points. He just had a really good rookie season, and he is in play again against this Tennessee defense that they've been banged up throughout the year. They lost their best corners. Let's take a look and see what their current injury situation is. See if we see more damage to this secondary that we can potentially take advantage of. All right, so we got Amani Hooker out, safety. Quandre Diggs and Ladarius Sneed are both out on IR still. A bunch of guys on IR as far as the offense. Some offensive line depth issues, as you can see from all these guys on IR. Tony Pollard is out. That's going to be significant, obviously, for Tyjae Spears. And other than that, that's pretty much what we're looking at for the injuries on the Titans side. Let's look at Jacksonville. Obviously, the big one is Trevor Lawrence is on IR. Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk both on IR. As far as the left tackle, Walker Little, that's a significant one. Let's take a look at the defense. The defense looks relatively healthy for Jacksonville. So that's good. Linebacker Ventrell Miller is out. Yeah, so this game could potentially be a shootout situation. The total is only 40.5 in this one, but the spread is 1.5. So we like those close spreads with these teams with nothing to lose, basically. Tennessee and Jacksonville being in the same division as well. Maybe we can take a look at some of the historic games between these two teams and kind of see what the tendencies are as far as scoring. So I'm going to Pro Football Reference. We're going to cross-reference the Titans with the Jaguars. I'll say the game earlier this year was only 10-6. Last year we had a 20-28 game, so 48 total in that one. We had a 34-14 game, 48 total in that one. 2022 we had a 36-22 score and a 20-16 score. So a lot of high scoring games, but this game that is the most relevant right now is that 10-6 game earlier in the season. This could go either way, though. I do think that a game like this could be a higher scoring game, and we're talking about probably a bunch of cheap options. Brian Thomas Jr. still cheap, 6,800 for what he's accomplished this year. Calvin Ridley is relatively cheap. He's at 5,500. He has not done a whole lot this year, but he's got that matchup. He's got a decent matchup, and he's got Mason Rudolph back. Had a few big weeks, 26 DraftKings points, 25 DraftKings points back in weeks 8 and 10. So he's definitely capable of upside in the right matchup, and this is a pretty good matchup for him. Westbrook Akine is going to be dependent on touchdowns, but he's capable of putting up 20 plus DraftKings points. He's only at 4,500. So a lot of cheap weapons in this one. Washington is the slot receiver, I believe, for Jacksonville, and he had a 27 DraftKings point week a few weeks ago. So all these guys have upside in the right matchup, and like I said, this is going to be a good matchup for most of these guys this week. As far as the running back situation, Pollard being out, Spears will probably be the chalkiest guy in the slate, but it's good reason. You see the last couple weeks, he's had pretty good weeks. He's only at 5,400 for starting running back against a weak Jacksonville run defense. They're giving up 27.4 DraftKings points a game, and that is the second worst defense against running backs in the league. So that is going to be a huge plus for Tyjae Spears this week. So Tyjae Spears definitely in play. Not going to have very much behind him competing for touches. And Tyjae Spears, we know, is used in the pass game as well. So that's going to be a big benefit to Tyjae Spears this week. Travis Etienne, kind of been MIA all season, but he's got a decent matchup with Tennessee giving up 24 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. Let's look at the snap counts on these guys. We haven't heard much from Travis Etienne in weeks on basically anything that he's done. Let's look over here at the snap shares. We go to Fantasy Pros for that. We can see 37% for Tyjae Spears last week. Tony Pollard had 24%. Typically the 39 and 31%. So yeah, you get an idea there of what the split is. I would imagine that Tyjae is going to be closer to 40 or 50%. And if we go down to Jacksonville, 35% for ETN and 19% for Tank Bigsby. The week before that, it was 61-22 split in favor of Travis Etienne. But even with these splits, like he's really just not doing anything. But they do face a weaker Tennessee defense this week, so you might be able to get something out of ETN or Bigsby, but I think there's better places that we can go this week for good running back matchups. So not really interested there. As far as the tight ends, Brenton Strange does not have a great matchup, but on the Tennessee side, Chigakonkwo has another good matchup. He's at 3,600. See what his ownership is. If Chigakonkwo's chalk, then it's basically an easy fade. And we are looking at 16.5% ownership for him. That's not horrible. Like there's three guys that are higher than him, including TJ Hawkinson at 25%. So I don't hate that ownership on Chig so much. And, other than that, defenses will be in play as well. But, you know, potential for this game to be a sloppy shootout, I think, is the main takeaway here. Vegas versus New Orleans. This game is going to be very. You're going to have to struggle to watch this one. We got Spencer Rattler. He's just terrible. We saw him on primetime the other night, and he was just terrible. Like 6.92 DraftKings points. Guy could not complete a pass. Like the team just looked awful. And we got Kamara out again on top of it. A lot of guys injured. Olave still on IR. Valdez Scantling might be back this week. We got a bunch of their guys on IR still, though. Taysom Hill on top of all those other guys on IR. So, this is a really good game I have no interest in. On the Vegas side, we lost Sincere McCormick a couple weeks ago to an ankle injury. Otherwise, he was looking pretty good. But, that's going to make a guy like Amir Abdullah interesting. Like everybody always thinks it's going to be Madison that's going to get the run. But look at Amir Abdullah. He's getting 19.6 and 19.5 DraftKings points. That's 4x. That's about what we need for him to be, like a solid value, a solid guy that can get us to the points that we need in tournaments. So Amir Abdullah is a guy that we should consider in play this week in a matchup against the Saints team, which has been giving up 24.9 DraftKings points a game to running backs. That's a really good matchup for Abdullah. Let's go and check out his his snap counts here. Looking at the running backs, going to go to Vegas. All right, so last week we had a 32% Amir Abdullah versus 42% for Madison. I think Abdullah has generally shown the more upside. Madison put up 15 DraftKings points last week, 2.3 yards per attempt versus Abdullah, which is 5 points. It should be a no-brainer for these coaches. Like I don't know why Madison's getting more snaps, but Abdullah is clearly the better running back, or has been the better running back this season. All right, so let's take a look at tight end position. Bowers does not have a great matchup. New Orleans has been pretty good against tight ends, but it's Brock Bowers. I would imagine he's going to not have any trouble against this defense. And then we got Jacoby Myers. Saints are giving up 15.1 DraftKings points a game to slots and 25.7 to wideouts. Jacoby Myers is 35% in the slot, and he's like 65% out wide. So that both those matchups work to his advantage. So Jacoby Myers might be the play over Brock Bowers with that Brock Bowers ownership. If you wanted to pivot off of that, like Jacoby Myers would be a good pivot. Let's check out Myers ownership. Myers, we're looking at 16.4%. So probably about the same actually ownership as Brock Bowers, maybe a little bit less, but both those guys are going to be in play. I think Myers has the better matchup and might be the guy worth starting. Let's see. Other than that, I'm not interested in the quarterbacks in this one. I have interest in Abdullah, and that's about it. Carolina versus Tampa Bay. This is one that could shoot out. We got another weather situation in this one. Keep an eye on these weather. Like, I'm in Nashville, and right now it's a torrential downpour outside, and it's been that way with heavy wind for for the past few hours. I'm recording this at midnight, so probably since about 10 o'clock, it's been heavy rain and lots of wind. And I would imagine like some places where we're talking about the South here in Jacksonville and Tampa Bay, probably dealing with a similar situation. Let me take a look at let's take a look at the weather situation here. All right, so if we're going down to all right, looks like we got it doesn't really say what the situation here. Just says the same thing that we see on DraftKings, that there's rain. So we're just gonna have to keep an eye on those weather reports in the morning and see, like what kind of situation we're dealing with. But like I said, like torrential downpours have had a big effect on some of these games recently. It played a role, at least, in the 6-3 game between Chicago and Seattle the other day, and we don't want to be targeting a game where we're going to have to worry about that crap. So Carolina versus Tampa Bay is going to be a popular one, and this is one that I wish we had a couple weeks ago before Carolina started. People started to catch on to Carolina. I talked about it a couple weeks ago how we needed to wait for the right matchup for Carolina, but that they were going to they were starting to show signs of improvement, and Bryce Young was starting to look good. And unfortunately, like in some of the not so good matchups, he was shining in those matchups too. So now Carolina versus Tampa Bay is going to be a chalky spot, but Baker Mayfield, good matchup for him. We're looking at Carolina team giving up 19.6 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. They are the worst team against the running back. They're giving up 29.2 DraftKings points. That's good for Bucky Irving and Rashad White. They're giving up 22.5 DraftKings points to wideouts. That's going to be good for Evans and McMillan. McMillan, I think, has been running a decent amount in the slot. They're giving up 11.4, which is a middling matchup to the slot. They're also giving up 15.3 to the tight end position. So we're looking for cheap tight ends. That's going to make this guy Payne Durham very interesting. Played him in showdown the other day against Dallas. 7 targets, 5 receptions, 29 yards. Didn't do a whole lot, but he was getting a lot of targets. So he did enough probably to stay under the radar for us. So let's check out and see if that's the case. Payne Durham, 9% for damn Payne Durham. So that sucks. I'd love to see him in that sub 5% range, but Payne Durham, 2,900 is going to be a good salary relief option for us this week. Jatavian Sanders returned, has not done anything much since his return, though, which is unfortunate. He was looking really good before he got hurt. He was getting decent opportunity, decent targets. He went on that stretch where he went 4 games in a row or so with 5+ targets. Let's look at the snap shares for the tight ends for Carolina. right, if we're looking at Carolina, I see Jordan Matthews 0, Ian Thomas 0, Stephen Sullivan 0. Okay, so we had 51% for Tommy Tremble and 39% for Jatavian Sanders. It's just unfortunate that Tremble played decently when Sanders was out, and he's continuing to get targets and the bigger role in the passing game. Tremble might be interesting in this one at 3,200, given that situation. So he's going to be in play. Durham's going to be in play in this one. Like I said, both those teams have decent matchups. The Carolina side, Tampa Bay's giving up 14.5 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. They're also giving up 20.8 to the quarterback position. They've been better against wideouts recently. They've only given up 22.3 and 11.2. As far as running backs, they're only giving up 21.2 DraftKings points to running backs, but Chuba Hubbard just got put on IR. So we're looking at a backup situation here of Blackshear, Boone, Sanders still on IR. Jalen Brooks, unfortunately, comes off of one ACL tear and goes right back on IR with another one. So, the situation here is pretty dire for their running backs. But on top of that, they have a bad matchup. So it's going to be all the more passing for Bryce Young. Bryce Young has had a few good weeks recently. Bryce Young's capable of, putting up some points now. We've seen some upside out of him recently, and he's at 5,600 against Baker Mayfield in a total 49.5 point total. This one could shoot out a little bit. Bryce Young is sub 10% owned. I like that about him. And he has weapons to stack with Adam Thielen. Tampa Bay is giving up 11.2. That's a middling matchup against slots, but that's the last 4 weeks. They've been susceptible, pretty much throughout the year. They're also weak against wideouts. They're giving up 22.3 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. So we're looking at Thielen, Coker potentially. Let's look at the snap share for these receivers because it's a little bit messy with the receiving situation here. Is Leggett? How's Leggett been? Leggett is looking questionable. Get a better idea of him in a minute here. All right, so wide receivers for Carolina. All right, we're looking at 40% for Thielen, 61 for David Moore. That's huge for David Moore. Jalen Coker had 56%. Leggett was out last week. Prior to that, when he was healthy, he was getting 67%. So I would imagine that let's look at the depth chart. All right, so Leggett, I would guess that David Moore is going to take the hit with Leggett being back potentially. At least that would make the most sense. David Moore being kind of a journeyman. They're probably going to want to give more run to Jalen Coker. Coker had 48% snap share the week that Leggett last played. Meanwhile, David Moore had 32%. David Moore jumped to 61% with Leggett inactive last week, and Coker, only jumped a little bit to 56%. So, yeah, David Moore seems to be the guy that will take the hit if Leggett is back. And Leggett, we're just waiting on word on that. So he's questionable. But if Leggett's playing, then he'll be in play. And Leggett, Coker, and Thielen will all be interesting. with Chubb being out and likely to be trying to pass the ball in this one. Mike Evans has a good matchup. Mike Evans is always in play. If you look at his yards on top of it, he's trying for 1,000 yards. He needs to get 1,000 yards to continue his streak. He's at 818 right now. That means the last 2 weeks of the season, he needs to get 182 yards. And I think that Baker was quoted as saying that he's thinking about it more than Mike Evans is. And Baker says he's always talking about it to Mike Evans about like getting him his 1,000 yards. So you can make you can bet on Baker is going to make a effort to get Mike Evans the ball in this one. So Evans is going to be definitely in play in a matchup where the Panthers have been giving up 22.5 DraftKings points a game to the wideout position. McMillan has been really good recently. Jalen McMillan, he's been getting decent targets the last few weeks, and he faces this Carolina defense that is susceptible to the pass. They've been a little bit better recently against the pass, but like Baker Mayfield, I think can kind of overcome that if this game trends towards a pass happy shootout type of game. So we got a lot of interesting pieces here. Baker Mayfield's definitely in play, but I think he's going to be probably the highest owned or right underneath Sam Darnold as far as popularity this week. But the good dude's just been a stud this year. A lot of 30 plus DraftKings points, 20 plus in almost like all these weeks. He did have a weak performance against Carolina. The last time they played, he only had 12 DraftKings points in that one. Let's go ahead and look at Baker Mayfield's historic performance against Carolina. Carolina, don't forget, is the team that he was on, I think, right before Tampa Bay. Or no, he went to Los Angeles and played there for like a few games, and then he got traded to Tampa. So let's look at Baker Mayfield. And let's see what he's done against Carolina. So, yeah, it looks like historically he hasn't done that great against Carolina. 235 yards, 135 yards, 202 yards. Even when Carolina was terrible, he was not playing well against them. Only 2 touchdowns in the last 2 years since he's been with Tampa Bay against Carolina, a division rival. So, they might just have the blueprint against Baker from Baker's time there. You see some of these scores really low. You saw 21-18, a 9-0 score. The game that they had earlier this year, 26-23, is promising. Let's see what happened in that game. In that game, Bucky Irving, 152 yards and a touchdown. Added another 33 receiving yards in that game as well. Mike Evans, 118 yards off 8 targets and a touchdown. They did not have Godwin in that one. So maybe like this is one where maybe like Baker, like being so highly owned, maybe that's a good excuse for us to get off of him and maybe go towards that Bryce Young side if we wanted to stack this game. Let's see what Bryce Young did in that game too. Assuming he played. Yeah, Bryce Young had a much better game. He had 298 passing yards and a touchdown. Added a rushing touchdown on top of it. So good game by Bryce Young. Last time he played against Tampa. Let's see what he did last year against Tampa. if he played them. He was benched for a decent portion of last year. All right, so let's go to Tampa Bay with Bryce Young. All right, so we have that 298-yard game, and then last year he has 94 yards and 178. So last year is kind of a wash anyways, but it would have been interesting if Bryce Young had success against them last year when he sucked. So that was not the case, but Bryce Young is interesting this week, and we got to watch out for that weather. Dallas versus Philly. Not really interested in this game at all. Probably going to be trying to get Saquon as much run as possible, but Dallas is going to be stacking the box against him. I mean, it's going to be obvious what the game plan is to get Saquon the ball in this one. It's going to be a matter of whether Dallas can stop him. Dallas has given up 24.4 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. As I mentioned, they have Kenny Pickett at the quarterback. Dallas has been giving up 20.7 to the quarterback, 22.7 to wideouts, and 14.1 to slots. And Philly's defense has just been on a tear. They've just been destroying everybody for the most part. Couldn't beat Washington last week, though, but Washington usually plays Dallas pretty close. So, like basically, Barkley's going to be the main point of interest in this game. You could go Brown or Smith and like maybe use that as leverage against Barkley, but I don't really see like those guys doing much this week. I'm not totally interested in Barkley either. I do think that they're going to be stacking the box against him. It's going to be much more difficult for him to run, and without Jalen Hurts there to add another threat in the running game and take defenders off Barkley a little bit, I don't think that's gonna be very helpful. Goddard still on IR, so we're missing the main tight end, Calcaterra. Typically Philly doesn't go to these backups, but with it being Pickett as opposed to Hurts, maybe that changes a little bit. Calcaterra could be actually in play this week. For the wideouts, CeeDee Lamb is out. But against this defense, I'm not really targeting any of these Dallas guys against the Eagles. I think this game is more of a like a Barkley or pass, basically. Indy versus the Giants. This is one that Indy needs to win to keep their playoff hopes alive. We're looking at Anthony Richardson being out in this one. Like Flacco is going to be interesting versus the Giants. Question is going to be: are the Giants going to be able to, or are they going to want to be competitive at all? They obviously are going to be playing for the number one pick, but they don't necessarily tank in the NFL, as my friend Spread Astaire says. New York versus Indy. Indy is giving up 16 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. They're giving up 24.5 to the running back position. And other than that, New York, that's what Indy's giving up. So Indy's been susceptible to the running back and the tight end. As far as the other side, New York has been susceptible to the running back position, but they have not been giving up a lot of points to wideouts. They've only been giving up 17 to wideouts. They've only given up 8.7 to the tight end position. We weren't really worried about tight ends with Indy anyways, and they're giving up 11.5 to the slots. That's significant because Josh Downs is going to be a popular option this week. I believe he is one of the higher owned guys in the slate. Take a look at the wideout position. 36% for Josh Downs. That is steep, considering that he's only in a middling matchup. But maybe we can take a look here at the injury report. Let's see if there's anything else that the Giants have that makes this matchup interesting for Downs. So here's the depth chart for the Giants. Their center is out, so yet another offensive lineman banged up for the Giants. Got a lot of depth issues on this defense. It's basically their entire defense is just on IR. And then you got Micah McFadden, who's going to be out this week. Just a mess with this defense. Like they're going to be in trouble. Dexter Lawrence is on IR now. It's going to be a bad situation for this defense. So maybe Joe Flacco, a veteran coming in, will be able to pick them apart a bit. Only got a 40.5 total on this one. Flacco in his other games, he had one 30-point game, so we've seen some upside out of him. Flacco made that incredible run with Cleveland last year to the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised if he is able to replicate it a bit, because we're talking about a competent veteran quarterback coming in to a matchup against a Giants team with nothing left to play for, and their defense is basically entirely on IR. So opens the door for a guy like Flacco to come in and pick this defense apart a bit. He could get Downs going. He could get Pittman going. Pittman has not had a good season. He's barely cracked double-digit points on a few occasions. Malik Neighbors would be interesting on the other side against this Indy team. Indy's been better against the pass recently, though. I think the main interesting guys are going to be the running backs in this one. They both have good matchups. Jonathan Taylor and Tyrone Tracy both have good matchups. Looking at against Tennessee last week, Jonathan Taylor had 42 DraftKings points, made up for fumbling that ball right before he got into the end zone the other day or the other week. So both those guys are interesting, but Flacco, I think Flacco could potentially do some stuff here. They're playing in New York. Flacco, like I said, made that run in the playoffs last year. Would not be surprised to see him, come alive in this type, like his reflexes, his internal reflexes kick in for the playoffs or something like that. So, don't be surprised to see Flacco have a decent game in this one. Miami, Cleveland. Oh, this is going to be a mess. We're missing potentially Tua, Winston. It's looking like Robinson's still going to be the starter. I don't understand that one at all. Looks like Winston is injured on top of that, but that's more likely like just a thing that they're saying so that they can't get criticized for putting DTR in there, knowing that like anyone can see that is actual trying to lose if you're putting that guy in your starting role. We got Chubb on IR for the running back situation, so Ford is going to have the backfield to himself. Achane going to have the backfield to himself as well, but like the Dolphins just play horribly all around without Tua. We saw that earlier in the season. You see the stretch of 8 points, 5 points, 2 points, 10 points for Achane. That's without Tua in the lineup. So, not really interested in any of these guys except for the defenses. I think the defenses are in play. Njoku is out. Just a bunch of scrubs in this one. It's just it's going to be tough to find anyone worth playing. So I'm not really interested in this one. Tillman's still out. Waddle and Hill both questionable. Miami's playing for something, so they're going to try to win this one at least. But they're just in rough shape this week. On top of that, Miami's a pretty tough defense. So is Cleveland. So it's going to be a low-scoring game in general. But on top of that, like just having all these scrubby players in there, I'm just not interested in this game. Green Bay versus Minnesota should be the most popular game. Sam Darnold is pulling in the highest ownership. He's pulling in the highest ownership, and he doesn't have a good matchup because Green Bay is only giving up 16 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. So that's going to be a rough matchup for Sam Darnold. So Jordan Love, similar situation. Minnesota's been pretty good against the quarterback this year. Earlier in the year, they were giving up more DraftKings points to the quarterback position, but it looks like they're tightened things up a little bit recently. They're only giving up 24.3 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. They're giving up 17.6 to running backs, and that's a terrible matchup for running backs. On the other side, the Packers only giving up 14.6 to quarterbacks. They're giving up 13.2 to tight ends. But this has a total of 48.5. Looking at a 1.5 point spread in this one. The last game that these guys played each other, we had 29-31 was the score. But like I said, that's when the defense was weaker for Minnesota, and Green Bay's defense has gotten better too on top of it. Even without Jair Alexander, they're doing really well against passing offenses. Problem is they're not going to be able to run the ball. So Josh Jacobs will probably be pretty obsolete in this one if Minnesota is able to continue to dominate against running games, forcing teams to pass. Jordan had 34 DraftKings points in that game against Minnesota earlier in the year. So it's going to be a good matchup, or at least a matchup that he's had success in. Let's go over to the injury report in this one, since this is one of the more important games here. All right, so as far as the Minnesota side, not a whole lot of injuries on the offense. Darrisaw is still out. That's significant for the offensive line. On the defense, not a whole lot of injuries on the defense. It's actually pretty good shape. Few guys on IR. As far as the Packers we're looking at Christian Watson is questionable. Dillard is out. Jordan Morgan is out. Those are offensive linemen. Got all sorts of issues in this secondary here. Bullard is questionable. He's the nickelback. Justin Jefferson runs a lot of his routes in the slot, so that's significant for Justin Jefferson. Safety, Evan Williams is out. That's good for Hawkinson. Another safety, Javon Bullard, is questionable. Jair Alexander is out. That's going to be good for, I guess Addison and Jefferson. Quay Walker, one of the linebackers, is out too. So Jones have a little bit easier of a matchup. So a lot of these impactful injuries to the Green Bay defense. So that's going to make this passing game all the more interesting on the Minnesota side. And with Green Bay trying to keep up or trying to keep this game competitive, I think we're going to see a passing game situation on Green Bay side as well. So let's start building these lineups now that we've gone through all that. Going to start with let's do a Bryce Young build in this one. I don't want to stack him with too many guys, so let's just stack him with Thielen. Remember, we're keeping an eye on the situation with Leggett. If Leggett is in, he's going to be interesting as well. But I don't know if I want to double stack Bryce Young because I just want to get enough out of him to pay off his salary a bit. So we just need about 20 DraftKings points. He can handle supporting one guy on 20 DraftKings points. I don't think that 20 DraftKings points is going to give us two scores that are going to help elevate us this week. So Bryce Young to Adam Thielen. We want to run it back with people. Let's put in Bucky Irving and Mike Evans too. All right, so we got a nice little game stacked there. The other game I want to focus on is that Minnesota game. Let's put Tyjae Spears in there because, like I mentioned with him earlier, I already like him, and he's pretty cheap. And let's look at the defenses, see if we can pick out an easy defense to plug in. Let's go with the Browns against that that terrible quarterback situation on Miami. All right, so we're left with about 5,500. I feel like we got a pretty solid team, and we got 5,500 left. Let's try Justin Jefferson. Let's put Jaden Reed. I like the matchup that Reed has. Let's see, specifically as far as Reed, give you a better idea here. According to Rich Rebar, Vikings are 31st in the league in points allowed to slot receivers. They're allowing 16.5 per game to slots. They allow 6.3 receptions per game to slot receivers and a 5.8% touchdown rate. So, basically the Vikings are like a much better matchup for Jaden Reed than any of the other receivers. So let's put Reed in there. Could leave us with 2,500 for tight end. Not the best situation. We could always try to take out Jefferson. Let's go with Addison. That leaves us with 4,500. That puts us in Hawkinson territory. So Hawkinson, Kincaid, Strange, even like any one of these guys, would be an option. So plenty of way that we can go with that tight end spot. If you wanted to put in a cheaper guy and switch out Reed or something like that, or try to work Justin Jefferson in here a little bit better. That could easily be done too. But this is one decent direction, using a Carolina stack to basically backdoor a Minnesota Green Bay stack. So let's clear that out. Let's do one straight up. Darnold, we want to stack him with two guys if we're stacking Darnold. Going to give him Jefferson and Addison. See if that's even feasible. We'll give it Reed on the run back. All right, let's get those cheap running backs in here. Spears, what was the other guy? Irving, that's right. Let's get Spears and Irving in there. As far as the defense, let's go down to, let's just go with the Browns again. It's going to leave us with 4,300 per position. Sam Darnold already got a Jefferson and Addison stack. So let's look at maybe we put in Kraft in this one. That's going to leave us with 4,700 in the flex. Gives us a few different options here. We got Pittman as an option with Joe Flacco as his quarterback now. We got McMillan on Tampa. We had Evans in the other build. Like McMillan would make a decent option as well. And then you're looking at like maybe double tight end with Hawkinson or guys like that. Oh, sorry, guys. All right, let's clear this out. Let's go with let's see. Let's go with the Baker build. That should be a fun one. Let's go with Baker Mayfield in this one. Put him in, and let's put in Evans and McMillan, who've been his guys. Where is he? All right, so let's get McMillan in there. And let's put Bucky in there too. We'll run it back with Thielen, if that's possible. I want to get some exposure to just plug in Spears. Let's go with that Cleveland defense. All right, so this one I could put in like Hawkinson. Have 6,300 left for a flex position, and you can put Addison in that one too. So we got Addison and Hawkinson representing that other game. How much is Reed? You could put Reed in this build as well. So that way, at least you have a mini stack of the Green Bay, and you're basically just hoping that game, that game's getting a little overhyped, and it ends up being one of those typical division games where it's low scoring. They keep the score close, but they hit the under on it, and it just doesn't pan out the way that like the entire field is planning it to be. That would be good for us if we only have minimal exposure to it. And Hawkinson and Reed are two guys that have a pretty good likelihood, I think, of hitting, regardless of what the final score ends up being in that game. But there's a few ways to go in this one. Make sure to hit that like button. Give me the 30 like so I can put out my picks in the comment section. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Give me that extra 50 subscribers so I can hit my 1,500 mark. And I will see you guys a little bit later on with the Showdown Show.